Teddy, tell your friends that you're sorry. They patiently waited for you like 40 minutes through a video, and you never showed up. You were napping, and they missed you. They ask about you. They don't even like me. They're here to see you. Say you're sorry. No? He's feeling it on the inside. Hello, endurance friends. I know why you're really here. It's okay, you can admit it. I won't judge you. This is safe. You're here for the drama, aren't you? That's fine. You know, a little bit of Zwift drama, a little bit of confirmation bias or your own internalized frustrations. We love that shit. Drama is great for clicks. Just love it. Can't get enough of it. Clicks so damn fast. You should hit the thumbs up button down there below as well. Really will make you feel better about a lot of things. Thanks for coming. But kidding aside, I have been talking for some time about making a debrief video for the Zwift Academy to give my overarching thoughts and opinions about how Zwift Academy 2021 went. Things that I liked and things maybe not so much. Some of the trip hazards that we faced along the way. I know that I've already spoken to some of these things that were a source of frustration, but I wanted to get through the Academy for the most part and give my full, fair thoughts and opinions on the Academy as a whole. And I am ostensibly done with the Academy. I have that one remaining recovery ride that will be available on October 3rd. That's not going to change my opinions of the Academy, so I figured that I would come on here and share my thoughts with all of you guys, which I know many of you have been waiting for. Now, if you are newer to the channel, I do want to make something clear here. I got a comment the other day, actually, that said something to the effect that I had a personal vendetta against Zwift and they were not going to follow me anymore. And if you've watched my videos for any appreciable amount of time, you know that to be categorically false. Many of the videos that I've made, a good portion of my content and popular content on this channel is surrounding getting people more engaged with Zwift, helping them to navigate. One of the most popular Zwift videos out there happens to be mine for the beginner's guide. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I wouldn't do that if I had a personal vendetta against Zwift. I have been on the platform. I wrote it in beta in 2015. I have been a paying customer completely uninterrupted since 2016. That's not going to change anytime soon. I constantly extol the virtues of this platform, but I do have fair criticisms that I share with folks so A, they don't get jammed up and frustrated with the same issues if they can be at all avoided, and B, because I want Zwift to respond to these things because I care about the platform. So understand that when I do share some of the frustrations and some of the things that I'm not quite happy with in this video, it's coming from a place of care and affection for the platform and not just to be negative for the sake of drama or negativity. So to start, the Zwift Academy campaign in general is certainly a net benefit, not only for Zwift, but I think for cycling as a whole. It's a great way of bringing the community together to strive around common goals. Even the entire pro contender competition notwithstanding, it's just a way for people to focus on something. It comes at a really good time of the year, September into October, where much of the northern hemisphere is starting to see some changes in weather. Things are getting a little bit more wet, a little bit cooler out. Daylight is starting to wane very quickly. There are kids going back to school, and there's just other conflicts that are making it difficult for folks to get outside and ride their bikes the way that they like to. So it's bringing a lot more people indoors this time of year. Not so many races or events or group rides happening out there. And this is a great way for the course of a couple of months to give people something to focus on. Some hard workouts, completing something, completing a campaign. So it's certainly a great option to have on the platform. If it's not the most popular event or campaign that they have, it's in the top 2 or 3 because it draws pretty large crowds every year, and I'm happy to see it. I love seeing all the people in the group rides and the events. In general, the Academy is great. Paring down to the 2021 Academy, I still think the Academy is great. I think that they did a really good job this year. I was super excited when I saw the format and all the great things that they had added from 2020 to 2021. I still believe in that. In fact, the best way I can word some of my frustrations with this year's Academy is that it was just so darn close. I really feel that Zwift was maybe 2 to 3 missteps away from making this Academy really something exceptional. It wasn't that it wasn't good, it's just that it didn't quite hit that exceptional, and I think it was for reasons that totally could have been avoided, and I think that's what's really the most frustrating. But I did like the Academy this year, and I want to kind of break down a few elements that I liked and some that I may see some, we'll call them opportunities for improvement. That's what we say in the leadership world, opportunities.
When people do this, I don't really know what that means.
But I want to start my breakdown with the things that I liked. I want to start things on a positive note because anybody can launch criticisms. It's really easy to launch those criticisms. And when I do in my own way, I do try to say how things could be better. Not just be a problem finder, but a problem solver. Obviously, I don't have to do the work, and I don't want to sit here and make it sound like I'm just sitting in the cheap seats throwing stones at the developers or folks from Zwift, because I know, especially the developers, have kind of an uphill battle against them. They're going into a very proprietary game engine. Many of them have been hired in the last 12 to 18 months, and let's face it, the game was never designed for the scale that we are looking at right now. So I'm not going to make excuses for them, but I do give them a lot of leeway in this regard. I actually am more patient than a lot of the Zwifters that have been on the platform as long as I have. As much as I might be vocal about some of my frustrations, I do give Zwift a lot of latitude, and I do have high hopes for them to improve some of the opportunities that I'm going to talk about, not only here, but I've talked about in previous videos as well. So what did I like about the Zwift Academy 2021? Let's start with the baseline and finish line rides. Now, before you come at me, I'm going to talk about the opportunities and the execution, but in general, in terms of design, I think the baseline and finish line rides were an excellent way to adapt what was last year termed segment rides. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, but bookending the Academy with 2 rides on the identical course that were meant to test different power systems is a brilliant idea, because we could have done this in terms of a fixed test in workout mode, absolutely. But mentally, it is much easier to perform those executions and look for those PRs when you have a little bit of an impetus around you. First of all, you're doing it in a group. So you have other folks next to you, you have a leaderboard, so you have that little bit of a competitive element. You're also on a course. I don't know about you, but for me, it's much easier to reach for those couple extra watts or those few extra seconds if I can see that finish line. You don't see that when you look at the red number and the clock counting down. It doesn't give you quite as much of that just final push that you need as you would see in the real world if you were going over a finish line or going over the top of a climb. Just a couple more pedal strokes left. It just gives you that little extra reach, at least in my opinion. And then you can compare your results side by side right there in the companion app, and you can know if you improved your time. Now, I don't know if many of you are going to have improved your sprint effort. These workouts and this entire campaign wasn't really working towards improving your sprint, but maybe if you're newer to structured training, you did see a lift in your sprint time. Awesome. Probably saw a little bit of a lift in that anaerobic effort, that 90-second to 2.5-minute effort up of Titans Grove, or your ability to endure that power, right? You've learned to suffer a little bit more during some of these workouts, which was going to be beneficial as you carry it onto a more real-world event, albeit on Zwift. And then, of course, there was that more threshold level effort, whether you did it on the volcano climb or epic KOM. Hopefully, at the end of the program, you'll see a little bit of improvement because you've been doing this work consistently, hopefully incorporating the right recovery and the right strategy around periodizing your training. But I really do believe that the baseline and finish line rides were a net positive, and I'd like to see them bring that back in 2022. The next thing I want to talk about is the workouts, and I think this is a very popular opinion. The workouts that came in 2021 are the best workouts that they have ever implemented for the Academy. I'm not saying that there were not good workouts in the previous years. In fact, maybe some of those workouts were a little bit better, individually speaking, but they did not come together cohesively like this year did. Last year was more of a kind of taking a spattering of all of the different energy systems, a little bit of sprint, a little bit of anaerobic, a little bit of threshold, a little bit of VO2 max, right? Touching on each of those energy systems through the workouts to kind of get that whole rainbow effect. But they didn't really work together. It was just kind of, here I'm doing these workouts and I'm testing these different energy systems, which is certainly useful. But in terms of building over the course of a plan, these workouts really worked together in tandem. They worked in concert. You were working kind of your lactate tolerance in those anaerobic efforts, and you moved into more of those threshold efforts. So they were building on each other, working similar energy systems, and more importantly, working energy systems that are practical to anybody on a bike. It will only be a net positive for you to work these systems, whether you're competitive or you're just out there trying to ride your local neighborhood or just like to hang out and free ride on Zwift. Those types of workouts can have an absolute astounding benefit if you do them consistently. I already talked about how ideally this program would be longer, and these blocks would probably be 8 weeks each with several workouts per, but that's not really practical, right? We're talking about adherence. Most of the folks on Zwift are not going to stick around for a 16-week protocol. Is that something that's an opportunity to put in maybe a challenge format to add to the challenges like the Tron Bike Challenge, where you can commit and you can click on it, and by clicking on it, you say, okay, I have to commit to these 16 weeks. I've got to do 2 workouts per week, 1 recovery per week. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of commitment. Have it be a cool unlock or a big chunk of experience points. It's a great challenge for those of us who want to seek out something a little bit more robust in training. But I think in terms of the academy in general, I think that this is a great broad brush approach that's something that's achievable for most of the people who are on Zwift and doesn't really force them in a position where they have to necessarily sacrifice other smaller campaigns or community events that happen during the course of those 8 weeks. The next thing I liked, and I'm going to put an asterisk on this one, is the recovery rides. Again, I'll talk about some of the opportunities here in a few moments. Incorporating recovery ride, just by having it as a part of the campaign, sends a message to people. It sends a message that recovery is important. And the Zwift Academy has not historically done this. In fact, I don't think a lot of platforms do this because many people are just looking for something that they can't do on their own, right? Oh, well, the workouts are fresh and they're different and they're unique and there's something that are gonna keep my attention. Recovery isn't sexy, it isn't fun, but it doesn't mean it's not important. So even if you didn't like the recovery rides, incorporating it into the Academy really does help to drive the message, especially to people who are newer to structured training and cycling, that actually the pros recover too, right? This is a pro contest. It's important to recover. Whatever level you're at, whether you're brand new or you're an absolute elite pro, recovery is a necessary part of cycling. The next thing that I really liked was the fact that they combined the men's and women's events this year. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever to have had those divided. They did so because the competitions were separate, and I think they wanted to keep the heads-up races separate as well, and that made sense, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense to have people divided for the group workouts or anything that wasn't race-specific. And I'm glad that with the elimination of the races, with the exception of the pro contender rides, they just mixed everybody together. As a female, trying to get involved in those events last year was really quite a challenge. When I tried to sign up for races, there were sometimes 0 riders in my category. Sometimes the workouts were 2, 3, 4 riders. Like, that's not any fun. You go into a group workout because you want to be kind of pushed by the group around you. I'm not saying that you can't with a handful of women, but if you're going through maybe something like a baseline or finish line ride, which was back then a segment group ride, and you only have 4 or 5 folks, the likelihood that those people are going to align in terms of ability and speed is pretty low. So how are you going to use those other people to draw off of and to compete against and to push you to work a little bit harder if you guys are scattered all over the field? So having the option to ride the open category is a real nice option to have, while maintaining the option for the women to ride in a women's only event. There are plenty of women who don't really feel comfortable in the co-ed events. No judgment. They have their own experiences or their own presuppositions about how that might go, so they should feel safe and secure in a women's only event if they want it to be a little bit more private. But mixing it together for this particular campaign, I think, was a net positive as well, because it just gave you a little bit more flexibility on rides, especially if you were in those off-peak hours. Sometimes it's hard to find other women to ride with. The next thing I liked, and this one has a bit of an asterisk as well, and I'll talk about those reasons, but bear with me on this one, is that they made an attempt to try to throttle back the progression toward the unlocks. And what I mean by that is, historically during these academies, you will get a good subset of people who just in the first few days will rush through and do all of the events and get all of the unlocks by the end of the first week. And typically those people are not doing those honestly. They're turning their FTP way down, they're just kind of soft pedaling through these workouts, and it really diminishes the amount of hard work that it does take to get these particular unlocks. As I said in my very original video for this campaign, this is not an unlock farm. You should be going through this program and trying to follow it the best you can as prescribed and get the benefits, the physiological benefits and the fitness that comes from doing these workouts and this entire program. So in order to control some of that, they kind of segmented off some of the rides, pushed them later into the academy, and that removed some of the access so that at the end of the first week, the best you could have done was got the hat and the socks. Now, I probably would have done this a little bit differently, hindsight being 2020. Perhaps I would have put those unlocks every 3 rides so that you could do whatever the first 3 rides are and then get your first unlock, and then 3 rides, and your second unlock, and then 3 rides, then your third unlock, and then everybody gets the bike paint scheme when the campaign has completely ended. They do this with the kit very often in some of the tour events, that nobody gets the kit in their garage until the entire event is over, so that there's no use in trying to rush through the program. Still getting those incremental gains, but you're not having anybody fast forward all the way to the finish line. I also would have done something a little bit different with the Canyon Air Road paint scheme. This was the same prize that you got last year. It's a different color scheme for the Canyon. It's the same prize, and the bike is not what it was back in 2020. That used to be one of like the best performing bikes in the game when it was released back in 2020. Now it's a very good bike. It's probably one of the best bikes you can get if you're under level 30, but for those people who are more experienced, it's not the best bike that you can get. People aren't going to really ride it all that often because there's better performing bikes that they can unlock. So I would have liked to have seen them maybe unlock a different bike maybe a new Canyon bike for this year. Or I would also like to see them have it as an entire bike unlock, and then you get the bike, you don't have to pay for it, they give it to you, and if you've already purchased the bike and it's in your garage, then you get the equivalent in drops, or maybe you get some experience points, whatever that might be. But give it something a little bit more enticing for those of us who have been around for a while and have done the Academy. The bike is now a year-old bike. There's no Aero 2022 in the game. Would have liked to see a little bit of an enhancement, but I think on balance, the unlocks are very solid, especially to those of you who are newer to Zwift. These are solid unlocks. But now let's get into the drama, the stuff you guys really came to hear. You guys love this stuff, me griping about Zwift. And honestly, it's not a ton of stuff. It's not this huge laundry list of things that I need to complain about. It really is only 3 or 4 things, and one of them is more nitpicky than anything. It's frustrating because it's such simple stuff. It's just not nailing communication, execution, planning, simple things that you should be doing, things that could have totally been avoided, things that are mild annoyances for me, but deal breakers for a lot of folks that might not be as experienced with the platform, that might not have that kind of patience. Folks that have paid a lot of money to get into the platform, even with a budget set up, and then to feel like they're twisting in the wind over just oversights, feeling like they're not being valued as a customer. It does get frustrating. I know it's not a big deal because it's a game, but it does end up being a big deal to a lot of folks because that's their time, that's their investment, that's their money. Right? Me having to redo a recovery ride a handful of times, honestly, who gives a shit? I have time to train. I'm going to be on the bike anyway. But for the person out there, maybe the single parent or the person with the hectic work schedule that's moved things around to get on some kind of ride that they thought they were going to get an unlock for or get credit for, just to find out that they didn't, and they're trying to figure out what's wrong, and then they have to come to one of my videos to figure out what the heck is going on, that's frustrating to me on their behalf. That's just a miss. So let's talk about those things. And I'll just kind of start in the order of when we ran into them. The baseline ride. Just like what was that? Now, I did put the onus on people who didn't read the instructions. I still do think that there's a bit of personal responsibility there for those people who just went out of the gate real hard. The information that you needed was there in the instructions. That being said, I think that in terms of a better and best approach, the best approach was to have some in-ride instructions, some on-screen instructions right at the beginning to tell people, whoa, pump the brakes, you're not racing right now, ride real easy, it's okay, we're not looking at the overall time. Now, I understand that Zwift does not have that capability. Many of you who are new might not understand that Zwift cannot put overlays, kind of like workout mode, in a non-workout event. The only way that's possible is in a group ride with a ride leader attached. You may have seen that in some of the recovery rides, although I think that was pretty inconsistent. But it cannot be automatically generated. That is not part of the program as of right now. If it is, that's really shocking because they've never ever used it. But I don't think it's baked into anything but workout mode because it's designed a little bit differently. So I understand why they didn't do that. Now, they could have assigned a ride leader to every single one of the baseline and subsequently the finish line rides. That's probably a tall ask. I think hindsight being 2020 and probably not something that they necessarily thought of, maybe do what they do with the pace partners. They may have had to set up a handful of laptops, have 4 different pacer bots for each of the rides, have them log in every 2 hours for each of the baseline and finish line rides, and then they just kind of ride a steady pace and then have them automatically send those chats out and make them the ride leader. So when the ride leader sends out a chat, it not only shows up in the bubbles, but it shows up on the overlay on the screen. So that might have been a fix for something like that, because I have to understand, and they need to understand, that you need to appeal to the least common denominator of effort, not of people, but of effort when you're talking about a game. So you have to really put it out in front of people. And some people don't navigate the companion app very well, or they don't read what's going on the landing page. So I still think that people should do those things, but I can understand how some folks that are well-intentioned got missed in that regard. The part that I'm not going to forgive is just the absolute piss poor identification of where those segments were. What the hell did they think was going to happen? Seriously, if this was my job, and I'm coming to plan out some kind of event, if I had missed something as simple as, well, how do I make sure my people know when they're supposed to start their effort? I would be called into an office for a very uncomfortable conversation. Like, this to me is just poor planning. It's poor contingency planning. Anybody with half of a brain and logic, you don't even have to be a cyclist to understand the overall structure of this ride and say, now people might not know on this event-specific course, mind you, not one of the typical courses, not one of the standard loops that you can select on the main screen, an event-specific course where even experienced Zwifters might get a little bit discombobulated and not know where the turns are coming. How am I going to tell them where the segments are? Yeah, they'll figure it out. Come on, Zwift. Come on. They're not going to figure it out. Now, I'll give them credit for reacting 2 weeks later. Probably missed a big portion of the riders, but at least it will fix the finish line ride. And they went in and they put the banners at the beginning of the segment. Although they still didn't execute that right, because I just rode the finish line ride on the Climber's Gambit. I went through the sprint segment. I saw the beginning arch, and then I go through the finish line, and then I see another purple arch. I'm like, wait, what the hell? Did I screw this up? And then I realized it was the start from the reverse direction sprint. Why did you not omit that? And what's happening is that, I think, especially initially, is they hit the easy button on this one. Because what they do is they have some assets from a programming standpoint. They have different graphics stored as assets. And there's the typical Zwift world. And then when we do some kind of event, whether it's a tour event, La Colle, the Academy, what they'll do is they'll just take the existing code. Instead of pulling in the asset that's always there, they'll reach for the different one. They'll reach for that special banner that they made for whatever event that you're working on. So they literally just make that blanket change, and they had no forethought at all. They just changed the banners from red or green to purple. So that's just poor planning. I mean, anybody who sat in a room and thought about this for more than 5 minutes could have predicted that that would have been problematic. So it was a source of a lot of frustration. They did the best that they could to scramble together a fix, but they really need to do a little bit better, figure out if they're going to do something with a ride leader or pacer bots, or program in the on-screen instructions for group rides. Whatever they need to do in the next year, they need to figure that out, because that was a big miss. And you're going to run in this again next year, because you're onboarding new riders every single year. So this one really frustrated me. But let's move on to the second thing. And I'm going to get a little bit animated on this one. And this was the recovery rides. I just did a video on this one to make sure that as many people as possible did not get jammed up in the same way by repeating the same recovery ride that wasn't going to count. I'm not going to belabor the point, because many of you have watched that video. But the short version of that story is, if you don't put it in the instructions and you don't make it clear in the names, how the hell do you expect anybody to understand what the unlock scenario is going to be for those two particular rides? You are just asking for a world of hurt by glutting up your support system, because nobody's going to understand that. We just talked about the least common denominator and trying to serve up a softball for instructions for people who are just not going to go through that effort. You didn't even put that in there for those people who are willing to go through the effort. And I'm going to be honest with you here, and I'm not going to share the exact conversation or the folks out of respect for the individuals who work for Zwift and for Zwift as a company. But when I did put in my support ticket and I got some response to my forum offline, I got a very dissatisfying response. It kind of read to me kind of like a, oops, well, too late now type of response. They acknowledged that it was a problem, but really didn't have any sense of urgency around fixing it. It wasn't just me. It was tons of people getting jammed up. I saw that in the forum. I saw that in the response to the videos. I'm sure the support tickets were absolutely abhorrent for this particular issue. They haven't done anything, at least as of right now, to fix that. And that's really disappointing to me. Beyond that, they put the schedule in place where, A, you couldn't do the first recovery ride until, I believe, the third week of the program. And then they took that away by like the 25th. So now these people who are just getting there, who are just learning they have different recovery rides, they're looking on the schedule this week, they can't even do that. So now they're telling Zwift, what gives? I can't get credited. I can't finish the academy. Should I even keep going? And then Zwift was like, oh, okay, well, we'll put a makeup ride in the last week so that you can make sure that you get credit for everything. Not good enough. Why would you even make those two recovery rides different? They're 45 minutes of recovery. Why do they need to be different? I understand, back to my point about trying to throttle back some of that progression so people don't rush through. But that was not where you should have enacted that. Maybe pull back the finish line ride. Make that available on October 3rd. That's something that makes sense. 4 weeks is totally fair for 10 different events. Put the finish line ride there. Don't throttle back the recovery ride. You didn't need to make 2 different recovery rides. That was just a silly move. And then the third piece, which is really the biggest dropped ball on this one. Who the heck thought that putting a recovery ride on sand and sequoias with a KOM in the middle of it was a good idea? It just completely defies logic. I think this was another easy button. I can't imagine that anybody with a thinking brain would think that putting like a 5 to 8 minute KOM in the middle of a recovery course, followed by some rollers, was a good idea for people to maintain a talking pace and recovery, especially if you're a bigger rider with a lower FTP. Unless you turn your trainer difficulty way the hell down, you're gonna struggle with just super low cadence. Grinding, even at a low level of power, really, really sucks. That's not recovery. That doesn't facilitate recovery at all. High torque efforts, even at low power, draws attacks from your muscles. Somebody who is a coach or has any understanding of cycling whatsoever would know that. So it makes me think that somebody looked at like the overall ride distance and profile and said, not a whole ton of climbing. That's a good one. Just pick sand and sequoias. What are you thinking? This is an unforced error. Anybody who sat in a room to discuss this program would have identified that as a bad move. I don't want to kick the dog anymore on this one, but the recovery rides, what should have been a really good thing, ended up being really poorly executed in my opinion. And that really leads me into some of the opportunities for just scheduling as a whole. It really made this program a little bit difficult and inaccessible to a lot of people. I do agree with trying to throttle back the unlocks, but I don't think you're going to manage that with the schedule. I think there needs to be another way of doing that, because what happens, you get too much confusion. You have people who are joining the academy a little bit later, right? Maybe they're using the first few weeks of September and they're still riding outdoors. Then they're shifting indoors and thinking, 5-6 weeks, that's more than enough time to do the academy and do the 10 events. That's fair. I can still take my time and go through, just to find out some of the key events are not available. You can do all 6 of the workouts in your workout folder and be perfectly fine. But when you're cutting off the recovery workouts after 2 weeks, in the 4th week of the program, and you're cutting off the baseline ride in the 4th week of the program, and then, you guys can make these up at the end. Well, who the heck is doing the baseline ride at the end? At that point, they're just checking a box. Who wants to wait to the last week of the program when they've done all of the other 9 events just to do one makeup ride because they started the program after you've pulled the first recovery ride out of there? It just doesn't make any sense. It makes people really jerk their schedule around to meet the Zwift deliverables in the academy. And for those people who don't train as high a volume, that don't have as much time to get on the trainer, with kids and priorities and all of those things, we all have lives. We don't like to feel jerked around and have to arrange our schedule around what Zwift is forcing us into when it could have been completely avoided. Again, I don't have a concrete answer for this, but I think that there was another way to kind of have both. Have an optimized schedule and have people throttled back from not getting all the unlocks in week 1. And the last thing is really just nitpicky. In fact, if the other things were not an issue in this academy, I wouldn't even bring this up, but while I'm bitching, may as well make hay while the sun shines. But it was about the workout instructions, the in-ride instructions. I thought that they were a little lackluster. I think somebody hit the easy button on those as well. There were some good points in there, don't get me wrong, but the first 10 minutes of the workout, it basically was a copy and paste of the description from the menu or the training folder. You could have at least made an effort to maybe add a little bit more supporting detail there. And then I saw that on a couple of the workouts, they really copied and pasted the directions for the intervals to the next identical interval. You change it up a little bit. And then some of the cutesy stuff, my friend Linda, you got to watch some of her videos. She's just so mad. She's so mad at these coaches for these really cheesy, anti-motivational on-screen instructions. And I completely get it too, because when you get towards the end of these workouts where you're fatigued, you're getting a little glycogen depleted, right? You're working really hard and you're reaching towards the end and it's saying something like, oh, it's feeling real easy. Like that was cute in the first one. On the last one, nobody wants to hear that. People really they're not going to respond to something like that. It's very distracting and it's kind of annoying. Towards the end of those sets, at the end of a workout, you either A, refrain from any type of on-screen instructions, B, they have to be very succinct and to the point, cadence directives or power directives, whatever that is, or the third and optimally would be just that little bit of motivation. Finish line is 500 meters away. You can make it. Push real hard. Nice smooth upper body. You've got this. Those are the types of things that people want to see towards the end. Not, oh, feeling real easy today while you're pushing threshold. Get the hell out of here with that. Linda had me cracking up today. So I think that they could have done a slightly better job with those. But again, that's just nitpicky stuff. I thought I'd bring that up. Let me know what you think about the workout instructions. But let me know what you think in general. Do you agree with these criticisms? I'm sure plenty of you have more criticisms than that. You can feel free to leave them down below. Do you think I'm being a little bit too harsh on Zwift? I hope that you don't think I'm being harsh. I hope you all understand that I love Zwift. I hope that you guys love Zwift. I want to see you guys continue continue to push those rides out over and over again for years to come on a really excellent platform. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to leave them down below. I'll leave 2 more Zwift videos up here if you're interested. Please hit that thumbs up button. It really does help the channel and the video quite a bit. Subscribe if you haven't already. All of the things. Okay, enough self-promotion here. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.